the biggest determinant in whether you're going to reoffend or not is if you've been sent to prison. Then you're more likely to reoffend. So we did that. What we were told is that at any given day, there's probably 60 to 70 people in prison who shouldn't be in prison. It's a lot of money if you think that it's costing $55,000 a year to keep them there.
Wow.
So, and then by doing that, we'll get those people out. Then we can also then bring home some of the people who are lodged out of state and bring them back in state where they'll get more programming and better attention, and it's better for their families because now they're back here and we have more control over them and it's less expensive. So we can do that. We did some other things. There are some people who are always going to drink and drive. I mean, you have 3rd, 4th, 10th offenses. And we need to do something about keeping them off the roads. So is treatment better than prison? Probably. So let's set up more treatment facilities. We also set up, I think it's 25 or 30 beds at the Windsor work camp that will be used for substance abuse beds for chronic offenders. And that's cheaper than sending them to prison. And let me think, there were a couple other things that I thought were pretty innovative around one of the problems is that we have 14 different elected state's attorneys, and each state's attorney and each judge then in their community determines whether they're going to prosecute and what they're going to ask for as a sentence. And so it's inconsistent around the state. Something that in Burlington would go to what's called rapid arraignment, and they'd be out and they'd be doing something else, some community service or something. Sometimes in Bennington and Windham County, they end up in jail. It's inconsistent around the state because we have different programs. So we've tried to standardize that just a little bit so that people have equal opportunities. So there's a lot of things that can be done around. We set up a study committee to look at more creative ways of dealing with people instead of just plopping them in prison. So I think that's pretty exciting. And as you probably remember, the governor, that was a major part of his campaign. Mm-hmm. And he got in some trouble for it because there was some kickback. And there are people who think that we're just letting people out on the streets who are dangerous. But
soft on crime is the word you hear a lot.
But really, these are nonviolent crimes, and these risk assessment tools are pretty good. They determine whether you're a high risk or a low risk to reoffend, and also as a safety issue for public safety and for yourself and for the victims. If there was a person victim, then it's less likely that you'll be released. But so we did that, and there were a lot of other things that went along with that. If anybody wants more details, they can. Actually, you can unfortunately go into the. You can Google Vermont War on Recidivism, and up comes some articles. Yeah, you've got to spell it first, but up comes some pretty good articles, and they talk about the bill a lot. The other thing that I think that we all know that the health care issue is big, and I believe it sends us off on the right track. And I'm sure that you're doing programs on the health care, so I'm not going to go into any detail on that one. We did pass the dispensary bill. That in 2004 we allowed people who had certain illnesses or certain symptoms, not illnesses, but certain symptoms, the ability to use marijuana for symptom relief. We gave them no ability to get it. So we had 85-year-old grandmothers calling us and saying, now I can't ask my grandson to get this for me, and how do I know what a drug dealer looks like? Where should I go? Well, that's ridiculous. So this year we worked very closely with the Commissioner of Public Safety and passed a bill, and we did not model it after California or Montana or Colorado or any of those places where they're having so much trouble. Instead, we modeled it more after New Mexico and even tightened it up more than that. They're very, very tightly regulated. There will be 4 of them allowed around the state, and they're going to have to be run as a nonprofit. The Department of Public Safety has to investigate all the people associated with it. It has to be secure and locked and not open to the public. And it isn't like having a little store downtown. In California, you know, there are little stores downtown, and they have pictures of marijuana all over the windows and stuff. And this isn't going to have storefronts. It'll be by appointment only. A patient will register with a particular dispensary and then have to pick up their medications at certain times. Usually they harvest about once every 2 weeks, is what we were told. In San Francisco is very tightly regulated. The rest of California is not. And we were told by San Francisco and New Mexico kind of how to do it, and then we did it even tighter than that. And we got law enforcement to work with us. The Commissioner of Public Safety and the sheriffs. And
well, if anybody has a, you know, some people I think have this idea that it's law enforcement that's really fighting, you know, against, and while they are fighting against drugs, that I think nobody more than them wants to see less people that they have to deal with and process, and less people kind of put away when they could be given a second chance. So it's,
right.
Of course, they're working hard on that front, it seems.
It is, and you know, there's, particularly when you have marijuana for symptom relief, then to force them to go buy from somebody that's an unsavory character. I mean, they don't know who they're buying from, and they don't know what they're getting. This is going to be tightly regulated. Everything's going to have to be labeled. They're going to know what it is. And the people who are patients currently know that, I don't know how much you know about marijuana, probably not very much, but there are basically 2 different strains of it, and one of them kind of affects your head, and one of them affects your nervous system. So it's for pain relief. One kind of does more nausea kind of thing. And there are varieties within those 2 strains. And there are certain varieties that people who have MS or cancer or whatever, you know, so this is going to be so much better for them. But anyway, we passed that. And the other thing that nobody talks too much about is the public records and open meetings. And I don't know if you've ever tried to get records from a public office. Most people want to comply. Most government officials want to comply with the Public Records Act. Some of them don't. Mm-hmm. But most of them do. But it does get complicated. What is a public record and what isn't a public record, and when does it have private information on it that you need to withhold, and when doesn't it? So we cleared up what is a public record, what isn't a public record. And if a government body withholds a record that shouldn't have been withheld, and somebody files a complaint against them, and they don't release it, if they have to go to court for it and they're found, and the other party, the requester, prevails, the government body is going to have to pay their attorney's fees.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what do people have a right to ask for when it comes to public record?
Well, everything is a public record unless it specifically isn't. So if, for example, I'm on the select board and I send emails to my other select board members, and it has to do with town business, that's a public record. Mm-hmm. Any written material I send out, any land records, anything like that. There are minutes from meetings. So what hand in hand with public records goes open meetings. So we dealt with both of them. And the public records bill passed both houses and will be signed by the governor. The open meetings did not get through the House yet. But when we passed the original public records bill in, I think, 1975, there were 16 exemptions, and they were things like private information. If you're getting food stamps or aid to needy children, nobody has that's not anybody's business. That's not your income tax information, that's nobody's business. So there are certain things that were in those exemptions. We've now gotten up to 270 exemptions, and we don't even know where all of them are. We have a staff person that's busy looking for exemptions everywhere. They kind of appear suddenly, magically, in different pieces of legislation. So there's going to be a committee this summer that's going to look at all the exemptions and see if they really should exist or not. And the committee is also going to look at the definition of privacy. What's the balance between the public's right to know and what the government has on private citizens? So protecting the privacy of the individual and the public's right to know what government is doing. And it is a pretty fine balance.
Yeah.
And but you know, that's why we get paid the big bucks, is to make those decisions, because if it wasn't a hard question to answer, then you wouldn't need us, right?
That's right.
It would just be straightforward and clear, and everybody would understand it. So we're going to look at those two things this summer, and also how to help smaller municipalities comply with open records laws. The state has more people and more expertise, but if you have a select board of 3 people or 5 people and you don't have a town administrator or anything, how do you figure out what really is a public record? And if there's a public record that is a record and there's private information on it, what used to happen is people would say, nope, can't do that because it's private. You have to redact that information, that private information. The record itself is public. So it's a little complicated. And then all meetings have to be open. And it's very specific when you can go into executive session. And so we tried to make that clearer and make it clear when this doesn't affect me because I'm kind of an old fogey here, but people your age, when they get on a select board, they want to I don't know what, email. I understand that one. I don't understand all those other things that you might use to communicate back and forth. But when does doing that constitute discussion that should be held in the public? And when does it constitute just information that clearly if you're setting up a meeting time or listing agenda items, things like that, that's pretty administrative. But where is this line between them? And that's very hard to determine. But so we tried to clear that up a bit by saying if it's used, and this still isn't very clear, but at least it tries to make it clear, if it's used to circumvent the actual or the spirit of the open meeting law, then you better not do it because you're not open anymore. So if you have any doubt, I wonder if I should be doing this, don't. Yeah. That's the answer.
Yeah.
But so that was really an exciting issue to work on and talk about.
And for a lot of people, I think they don't always recognize just how much access they have to these records and just how much transparency our government really has or is supposed to have. One thing I have learned here at BCTV is how important that gavel-to-gavel coverage is.
It is.
And it's great that our local news outlets have the sound bites for us and things like that to kind of get updated. But if you really want to get at the heart of what your government is doing, you need that coverage and that transparency.
Right.
So.
And just, there are times when it's necessary to go into executive session.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
very
absolutely.
clear. But you can't make any decisions in executive session. You have to come out and make a decision. And sometimes there's no decision to be made. But it is clear that there are times when that needs to happen. But we had one town, I think that we were told, they went into executive session for most of every single meeting they had. Well, now, they're not talking about personnel matters or contracts or pending suits all that often. And there are people who try to get around the open meeting law by going into executive session, or, you know, we used to talk about it as the frozen food aisle. If you run into if you're on a 3-person board and you run into one of the other select board members in the frozen food aisle of the grocery store, do not talk town business because that's a quorum. So now you use the same kind of thing with email and phone calls and stuff, but it is hard. So we need to be clear about the law and what the expectations are, and then we need to help people comply with it. So we're working on that. But those are the kinds of issues that I just love dealing with, because they really are, I think, at the very heart of our democracy. Is how do you engage people, and how do they know what's going on, and how do you make government accountable to the people that have elected them? And it isn't just the elected people. At the state level, you have a huge bureaucracy, something like 8,000 employees. Well, every single one of them is somehow carrying out, doing the business of the government, and what they're doing and how they're doing it is public information. So it isn't just the elected officials, it's kind of everything that we do. So it's we heard some horror stories and then we heard some horror stories of people making public records requests. One town over in Rutland County, somebody has requested, he's made all kinds of requests, both open meeting challenges and public records requests, and has done it in the last 18 months. I believe she said filed 40 or 50 suits against them.
Wow.
And I mean, we also did put in there that if the court determines that the person who's requesting the records or filing the suit against the open about a violation of open meetings, if they're doing it solely to harass or if it's frivolous, that the public body can ask for the court to award them attorney's fees against the person.
Wow.
So, I mean, a court isn't going to do that very often, but in this particular case, it sounds to me like
extreme example.
Yeah, it was. But so I don't know what else. We did the farm to plate, which is a big thing, and I don't know if anybody's talked very much about that yet or not. But it's exciting. Just trying to make sure that we have food security, and I mean that we're producing enough of what we need, and we clearly can't be completely independent, and we know that, but we can be more independent. We can buy more things local. Our institutions can buy more things local. The State House cafeteria, for example, buys really as much local as they can.
That's amazing.
Not a lot of bananas and coffee, but they do buy.
There's some exceptions.
Yeah, and
bubble gum.
And we've established a coordinator for the Farm to Plate program at the state level. So they'll be working with, if you have 3 acres and you want to produce something that could generate some income for you, you can contact this coordinator, who will have a pretty good idea of what's being produced in Vermont and what isn't being produced in Vermont. And what we really need right now is cucumbers. Because nobody, I mean, I'm making that up. Don't go grow cucumbers. No. I'm just saying that the coordinator can help you get a better handle on what's needed. Because if everybody's growing cucumbers, then you probably don't want to do that. But if nobody's growing cucumbers, and so there's nothing for people who want to pickle, maybe you want to grow cucumbers. So that's one of the roles of the coordinator, and that's pretty exciting.
Very cool. And it's amazing once you get kind of started on trying to buy more local. even without sort of the pressure of doing what some folks have done, like Barbara Kingsolver or
I
Bill
know.
McKibben, and trying
I
to eat
know.
all local, but just trying to kind of be aware of it and just and
Yeah.
knowing that there's all sorts. I mean, we do live in a state where, you know, all your cheese and yogurt
Right,
and
yeah.
you know, there's just so many things you can get local. It just, you know, once you get the momentum going, it's
And you
it's
know,
just
we
that
do
much
not
easier.
have to eat asparagus in February. We can eat winter squash.
That's
We don't have to have it. But
Asparagus in February, it's a terrible thing.
I know, and there's probably no nutritional value in it anyway,
That's
even
right.
because it was picked long before it was ripe, and it came up from Mexico or Southern
That's right.
California or someplace, and there's probably no nutritional value in it anyway. And then you have all that exhaust from all those trucks
Exactly.
that trucked it up here, so now you're increasing asthma in kids because of the air pollution. It's a mess. Just wait till May or June and have a local
That's right.
asparagus.
It'll be worth it.
Yeah.
Sounds
So
good.
one other thing that I just want to mention,
Absolutely.
that the closure of Vermont Yankee clearly is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you've done programs on where we are with that and the lawsuit that's been filed against the state.
Nobody around this town really cares about that. It's
No,
not.
I don't think so. I think that's mainly up north that they are talking about that. But we did in a jobs bill, there's $50,000 that's specifically destined to come here to Windham County in the BDCC and the town, along with I think it's the Dover Chamber, Laura Sebalia, it's Dover, Wilmington, that area, and Bellows Falls, that kind of have all been working together on economic development and the plan, and planning for, economic development in general, and what do we want to do here, but then particularly in light of the closure of Vermont Yankee. So there is money in there that will be used for that. I'm not exactly sure how yet. I know there is a meeting, there are some meetings taking place. I think Steve Morris is running those meetings on how to do that. So yeah. But I
Very
think,
cool.
yeah, lots of things happened.
Yeah.
And tons of things that never get any press. We passed a really good palliative care bill that is going to train people and make better pain management care available for, and I think most of us, I did myself, and most of us tend to think of palliative care as kind of at the end of life when you're dying and you're in pain. But there are a lot of children who have diseases that need to have some kind of palliative care. And so a lot of those kinds of issues are passed and never get any recognition and don't really have a big impact except on that group of people that have been very concerned about it for a long time. And I know that sometimes people say, why are you spending your time doing that? You should be working on, you have a budget shortfall of $176 million. Well, we have, in the Senate, we have 11 committees. So we don't all work on the same thing, you know, and there are things that are very important to people, and we work on those because they're important to the state, even though they don't have the same impact as healthcare reform or the really big glitzy kinds of issues. So.
Well, and that's why we appreciate having you on BCTV to give viewers out there a chance to kind of hear about some of these other issues that you don't get in that kind of quick soundbite coverage.
Yeah.
Out there.
You know, if anybody has questions, they can always call and ask too about things. And just for people's information, if a bill that they were interested in was nothing happened to it this year, that doesn't mean it's dead, because in January we pick up exactly where we left off on May 7th. We just start our committees again with the same bills. There will be different bills introduced. There will be new bills, but the same bills are already also there. the only time they die is if they haven't been dealt with by next May of 2012. When we go home, then they are dead, and then they have to be reintroduced, because they don't go over from biennium to biennium, but they are alive during the session. So people should know that so if there's anything that they were concerned about that didn't seem to go anyplace, they should contact us and let us know and have us start working on them in January when we go back.
All right.
So,
Well, thanks for coming in. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Kick off our
yeah,
debut show here. And,
It was
and
great
get
fun.
you in here. So
it was great fun, and thank you so much. And I have to say I appreciate what BCTV does, because it's hard to get word out, and the more ways you can get it out to people, the better it is. And you guys are always kind of right there trying to get information out to people, and I really appreciate it, so thank you.